Hey everyone, and welcome. I'm giving everyone a few minutes to get get into air meet. Don't know where we're at today, but as you can see on the screen, icebreaker here. So please let us know in the chat, what's the first workflow you ever automated? I had to really think on this one, and took me back to the early 2000s without aging myself, of doing FTP file imports into Silverpop, which was the marketing automation platform we were using at the time, and looking for those opportunities to just streamline process. We've got Lindsay with lead scoring model, making it way too complicated. Excited to really dive in on this as we talk through automation and some of the nuances. And I've been guilty of overcomplicating automation several times too. So fill that in. Other thing, where you're calling in from too. Always love seeing where people are at around the world and jumping in, and we will get started here in about 30 seconds or so. I just still see people trickling in, so want to get everyone settled in here. I love, Jonathan, the daily motivational quotes. All right. Oh, I think we've got a good quorum. So thanks everyone for joining today. We are going to hit a really fun agenda. We're going to talk about the MRCII methodology for identifying process ready automation. Lindsay and I have joked during prep for this on, the name MRCII. So I think we'll have some fun there. How to understand the capabilities you can unlock with automation, discovering the ABCs, Ds, and Es of being able to scale automation effectively, and just general insights, practical examples for revenue operations workflows. You've got a great group of panelists here today that are more than happy and willing to share experience, and really leaning into that, I think will be great. So a couple housekeeping items. Webinar is going to be recorded. We will share the recording at the end of the session. We will have time for a live Q&A at the end, but from my experience with these sessions, ask questions as you have them, right? They'll be relevant to the topic that we're covering, and we will be monitoring the chat prompt and the Q&A prompts on the right-hand side of your screen. So plug questions in there and we'll start feeding them in and just make sure we're getting everything answered, but we'll also leave time at the end of the presentation. If you run into any technical difficulties, just refresh the screen. That should hopefully get you back into the system and not keep you out for too long. And most importantly, the best sessions come with dialogue. So ask the questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. We're all here to learn. We're all here to grow and automate together. So let's dive in and really get this going. So who's talking at you today? So Molly Bodensteiner, I am the VP of Operations at Sound. I have been in the revenue operations space for the last 15 years, worked at a number of different organizations, from SaaS to ag tech to biologicals. And, I'm so excited about talking about automation today, just as I've seen, continuous efficiency gains throughout my career in being able to build automation for scale, being able to reduce, redundancies, and really build processes through using technology in the right way that drive those outcomes. So, again, I think we've got a great group of speakers. I'll let Jonathan and Lindsay introduce themselves, but just really excited to, share learning, share best practices, and hopefully learn from all of you guys as well. So I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Hey everyone, excited to be here. So my name is Jonathan Moth. I'm currently the Executive Vice President over go-to-market strategy, operations, and a few other things. But I've been in B2B and B2B2C and B2C tech actually my entire career, all in go-to-market. I've been doing revenue operations or some semblance of that. I was in it before as kind of like Molly, before revenue operations was even a thing. It was called sales ops back in the day. So I've been doing that for about 8 years. So excited to talk automation, one of my favorite things. So I'll pass it over to Lindsay.
Thank you. I'm Lindsay Roethlisberger. I lead revenue operations at Zapier today. In my past experience, I got a background enriched in marketing and marketing ops previous to revenue operations at both startups and large enterprises. And so I've seen really scrappy automation and super scaled automation. So excited to dig in here today.
Love this. All right. Well, let's jump in, right? So there's tons of different ways you can identify, potential automation opportunities. So Lindsay, I'm gonna call you like the queen of automation coming from Zapier. So let's talk through like how do you do this at Zapier, right? So, I'm gonna say like put your money where your mouth is kind of situation because I think you're gonna have some of the best insights here. So how do you identify those opportunities?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Molly. So at Zapier, we've come up with what we're calling the murky framework to identify automation opportunities. So sometimes our customers will say, like, okay, really cool, but what do I automate? Where do I start? So this framework helps you kind of identify the best opportunities. So first is, do you have a task that's really manual? Is it draining resources and time? Um, I think manual is important, but it only typically matters if it's also repetitive. So you don't need to automate every single manual task, but if it's something that's happening over and over and over, like lead list uploads or things like that, definitely worth considering. Cross functional. So typically different teams are in different tools or systems. And when you introduce like cross functional processes into your business or your workflows, it gets a lot more complicated. So that's typically a space that's really ripe for automation. And then are the tasks invisible? So in RevOps, I think we can relate that we do a lot of tasks that might be invisible. I think things like CRM hygiene is an example that comes to mind. And these are the types of things that like your C-suite probably isn't super excited or interested in learning about. So when tasks are invisible, they're a great opportunity to automate because you can then focus on the higher impact, more strategic work. And then on the reverse side, when things are really impactful, if you're seeing an initiative work really well, how do you scale it and get even more out of it? Is another area to consider. And I think it would be awesome to hear from Jonathan and Molly too. But Jonathan, is there anything from your perspective that I left out here that helps you identify potential opportunities for automation?
No, I think this is a phenomenal framework, and most of it has been around, for me, the MRCII, manual, repetitive, and cross-functional are really the right places. I love you said invisible. Again, and where if everything's going right, you never talk to us in RevOps, right? Everything's great, but then once something hits the fan, it's always like, oh, I got to bring in RevOps. So I think these are really good. And what I think the only thing that I would add to it, and two other places that I really look is one is how can I take out friction from the customer journey? So the customer interacting with our product, our software, our people, et cetera. So if you think about things like knowledge base, being able to serve up the right content in the right place for them at the right time, or customer feedback, onboarding automation, things like that. And I think the second thing I would also say is now in the world of AI, I'm starting to look in places where I can help people be more intelligent and more predictive. So automating things of like proactive notifications around customer health scoring changes, or a spike in ticket volume or things of that nature. So it really puts them on the front foot and gives them the insights they need to have great conversations. And so I think those are the only two things I would add, but the framework is phenomenal.
Yeah, second that. The only other thing, I think about, and I'll throw another I in here, right, is like when there's inaccuracies or inconsistencies and things that are really prone to human error that don't need to be. So drop that in, making sure. Hopefully my audio still coming okay? Sorry about that. Sometimes I turn my head too fast and lose it all. Thank you guys. Hopefully back. Sorry about that. Perfect. Well, so another way to really think about just automation opportunities is through capabilities. So Lindsay, you want to dive into that?
Yeah, that sounds great. So, one of the other ways we sort of categorize the different automations that we build in RevOps at Zapier is around these core capabilities. So, first, excuse me, alerts and notifications. So this maps to the notion of like making teams more proactive by taking away manual steps like combing through lead data. So we send notifications to our reps whenever someone in our sales process takes a high value action in our product, for example. And then cross-functional handoffs. Jonathan had mentioned this as well, but like I think it's really important to make sure that teams are aligned, and RevOps can do a great job of making sure that there's an amazing customer experience. And so how RevOps plays a role there is making sure that, for example, all of the information about a customer from sales is then passed on to customer success, and that onboarding can kick off really seamlessly. You don't want to ship your org chart. And so that's another great opportunity for automation. And then personalization at scale. These are like all the marketing automation use cases that we know and love, like being able to really personalize messages at scale. And then even on the sales side, being able to make sure that your reps are armed with like all the information about your customer so that they can have a really effective conversation. And then lastly, data hygiene and centralization is a huge one, right? Like you want to make sure that all of your data across all of your systems is telling the same story and is in sync. And automation is really like the best way to be able to make sure that your systems are connected and the data is centralized and you've got really accurate and reliable information for your entire company to be able to use, not just for reporting, but for communication with customers, et cetera. Um, excuse me. I'm curious, Molly, maybe we'll start with you this time. Are there any like additional capabilities that you've seen automation really unlock in your experience?
Yeah, the one thing that I think a lot about is we move into the world of like partnerships, right? And having more of that, you think about cross-functional, but also like cross-partner alignment too. And that ties, a little bit with the centralization, but being able to not only work to automate between internal systems, but also external systems as you think about co-selling and building those right kind of partner ecosystems. Like how do you do that in the way that you're sharing the right level of data between organizations? That again, it all goes back to like the customer experience that you're working to create and you need to create. So right person, right time, right message, but being able to drive that data between, so you're not running two different sales cycles, you're running one, even if you are between two different companies.
Totally.
That's
How
awesome.
about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I would just add, I'm love that you gave a partnership example because that's becoming more and more part of go-to-market motions for companies. So I love hearing about that. I think the only thing I would really add is, when you think about a framework, I would say ensuring that you have a standardized go-to-market framework across, the entire customer and buyer journey from, traffic to churn, so marketing, sales, customer success, support, RevOps, enablement. So you can leverage these types of automations and these types of capabilities. So they're not in silos, and they make sense when there are those cross-functional handoffs, whether it is to a partner or an internal, different team. And so I think this allows people to be on the same page. It allows to ensure that there's no, the definitions are right. You understand what data is coming to you and what format, et cetera. And so I would just say that's one of the things I see missed a lot, especially when you're automating, is you automate in silos among the teams, or you push an automation and two teams have different definitions of things or different understanding. So ensuring that you have that as a RevOps leader is super important to ensure that these capabilities can work.
Yeah, I think that's a huge call out, Jonathan. Like, we think people process, data. And I think we've got to get that step of like that policy, right, and governance in there before we think about, the data, which ultimately should be producing, or sorry, the process, which should be producing the data and then using that technology to automate. So I think that's a huge call out of, that alignment and definition, because otherwise you're automating again in silos and you're getting different outcomes and the consistency is just not there.
That's right. 100%.
Awesome. Well, we talked through kind of just that. How do you find the opportunities? What's the capability, the murky framework? Like, let's shift and talk to like, how do you implement and scale automation, right? And what does that look like? How do you actually do it? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try to keep my audio. Let me jump here. So Lindsay, I'll turn it turn it over to you on scaling automation.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. So, when it comes to scaling automation, of course, you need to make sure that your automations are durable, right? And they can handle like the amount of data and information that you're pumping through them. So, that's one. But I think too that a large part of scaling automation at your organization is really comes down to securing buy-in across your org. And really, I think RevOps and why I love the like centralized operations model because we can see across the entire customer journey. RevOps can play such a unique role, I think, in sort of like championing automation in an org. So first of all, the one thing I want to call out with A here is aligning with the company goals. So I think in RevOps, the downfalls that I've seen is when we get shiny object syndrome and we get really excited to go tinker and build a new automation that might not be super impactful and worth us focusing on. So the first thing is like, how do you really focus on like what's going to unlock the most efficiency, the most revenue for your organization? And then secondly, building robust documentation as you scale. I know this is a given and this one's just so hard to prioritize, but it is important. And so working documentation into your process, it's not wasted work. It really, really is crucial to scaling. And then collaborating across departments. If you don't really understand the goals of your marketing team, the goals of your sales team, the goals of your finance team and your legal team, like it's really hard to build the right solutions. And I like to think of operations sometimes as like these, like as product managers, right? Where your customers can sometimes be your internal folks as well as your actual customers. So how do you really understand what their needs are and what the bottlenecks are that they see so that you can predict opportunities? And then defining clear success metrics. This is one that's a little bit trickier, I would say, to do on the front end. Sometimes it can be a little murky, like to try and figure out what the outcome will be of something that you build. However, what we have started doing on our RevOps team at Zapier is like after we launch a new process and we automate something, we go back and reflect on the impact that it had. And we like, was it adopted? Did people use it? What were the breaking points? And that's been really, really helpful in being able to like sort of pattern match and see like what should we be putting more of our effort toward in the future and what hasn't worked well in the past. And then enabling everyone to automate. I think this is a huge opportunity for RevOps folks to really like think outside too of just like the workflows that you know and understand and think of how can I actually empower my org to automate. And one of the things that we did on our team in RevOps at Zapier is we created a Zap that actually takes customer information and allows you to generate with AI like a piece of content. And in this example, it was an automation guide for our customers. And so we made that sort of like framework or that automation that marketing can actually take and use it in a bunch of different ways. So they can get in there, they can adjust the automation, they can use it to create other types of content. So that was a really interesting way that like RevOps didn't necessarily automate like everything on their behalf, but we set up the frameworks for them to be able to go self-serve and make use of something that we built, which I thought was really cool. I'd love to hear a bit from Jonathan, maybe. Is there anything that has stood out to you when it comes to like scaling workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, by the way, this A, B, C, D, and E, I see so many times, even me in my past, have missed some of these, one or more, and they're so critical to ensuring not only that you're building the right automation that has the right impact, but also that you get the adoption. And so I think that's where I'll start, with things that don't scale in regards to, getting the buy-in. And so I always talk about this, ensuring that you're not only your stakeholders, but also your executives. So you can think about aligned with your company goals, as well as collaboration on the C. And D, having the clear success metrics. Because what I've seen is if you don't communicate the why are we doing it? How will it impact you, our business, the customer? What is it that we're doing? And ensure that you have a strong implementation and change management plan, because it's great if you automate something or, or you build some automations that are supposed to help. But if it's not really well understood and how it will impact me, and you don't have a good change management plan, then people aren't going to use it effectively or use it the right way or even adopt it. And therefore you kill your aligning with your company goals, defining success metrics. So I think that's number one. The second thing I would say, that I see a lot of times is, I think you have to do the unscalable first in order to understand what to do to scale. Because if you don't know, and this kind of goes with B, I've seen people try to automate things and they don't even really have the robust documentation to understand what is it end to end that we're automating and how will that impact. And so you either don't build the right automation or it's not fully developed. Maybe it's only part of the automation that really needs to be built. And so ensuring that you're doing these things at an unscalable level, very manual, so you really understand the inner workings of the impact, how it works end to end, et cetera. Then you automate it, and that allows you to scale it going from there. So I would say those are the two things that I've seen.
Yeah, I love that, Jonathan. You've got to actually understand the process before you start to automate it. It's huge. And we had a question in here, other things found helpful in scaling. One of the things that I think a lot about is like, when is it going to fail, right? And starting to identify, at what point will this automation scale or break? Oh, I apologize with audio. Hopefully I'm back now. Am I good? You guys hear me okay?
I can hear you a little better now. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Mentioned the group. We've got some construction going on, and I think that might be messing with my Wi-Fi a little bit. Hopefully we'll power through. But back to kind of what I hopefully people count on is just understanding when it breaks, right? At what point will this automation fail, right? So it can't always be a set it and forget it. So when you're building that documentation, starting to outline, when will this not work or when will this need updated, right? Especially if you're putting any hard coded references, at what point, if we change a record type in Salesforce that this automation is dependent on, do we need to go back and make those adjustments? So really making sure you're almost doing like the post-mortem at the start as well, to try to predict and define like when adjustments will need to be made.
I love that. Sorry, I think that's like such an important piece that oftentimes like we don't think about before we jump into building something because we're excited to get it built. But then it's like thinking through, okay, like what's the next version of this and what are the potential breaking points of this long term is like it's definitely something we should like I think make space for in our day to day, but often gets overlooked.
Yeah, I think the other part that, for me, when I think about just these A, B, C, Ds, and E's, like the documentation to me, I think is the part that we miss a lot of the time, right? We build it and it's working, but we don't document it. And I think that becomes such a huge point of scale and I'm going to say general debugging, right? For any of us who have walked into an existing company with an existing tech stack, let's call it, Salesforce, and you're like, what does this do and why? Right. And, going into any flow, there's this just natural debugging. But if you actually, spend the time, put that documentation in place, like just understanding what's happening technically and how it relates to the business becomes so much easier.
Yeah, I actually relate it to a lot of companies do this, right? I mean, you think about not defining your ICP appropriately, and it's something that is so core to the business, and a lot of times it's something that is not done effectively. And I kind of relate that example to documentation because it's the same thing you said. Why are we doing it? How do you do it? It's the same way if you don't know your ICP and you're trying to sell your product, they're like, what is this doing for me? Why would I do this? Same thing with documentation. If you don't have it, it's like, what is it? Why am I doing it? I don't understand it fully. And it helps with knowledge transfer too, right? With new people coming on board, or to your point, debugging, or even going to E, helping everyone automate. Tools like Zapier. I mean, they're easy to, even with the AI. By the way, I love the AI. I could spend plenty of time on it creating workflows now. It's like so amazing. But ultimately now if you have robust documentation, along with even AI or not even full knowledge, you can do E here, which is enable others to automate as well, because they can start learning how to do things, and you expand your ability as a RevOps team. Because one of the challenges with RevOps, right, a lot of times is bandwidth. I can only do so much. I have to prioritize and things. And so if you're able to enable others to do certain things and you have documentation on how to do it, then ultimately you can, expand your reach.
Yeah, if you don't want to own it, document it, because that's what actually allows you to hand it off.
Exactly.
I really like
Perfect.
that.
That's what I try to instill in myself a lot of the times in teams, right? Like, even if you build it, it's like, if you can document it and you can easily hand it off, you don't have to be the forever owner of it. As we, start thinking about things, I'm really excited about, examples of high impact automation that we've all created. So I think, Jonathan, you're up first.
All right, awesome. So yes, I think someone named Eamon said, I created something that was functional but not sexy, and so that's what I'll say mine is here as well, because I think a lot of times, at least to start, the functional ones have such a really big impact, and so this is a very simple one. But I actually, when I talk to companies or others, and everywhere I've been, I haven't really seen things like this automated. So this is just a simple: how do I prepare for a meeting? And so you think about, whether it's an SDR, a BDR, or even an AE, or heck, even partners, you could say this as well. How do you spend time researching? You spend time, looking up data, all these things, and now you can really automate this. And so this is an automation that I've created, where basically, if a new meeting is booked, basically from your CRM, you can pull in all the relevant contact information, LinkedIn profile, email, all those types of things. I can actually then send that information. I use copy.ai. There's plenty of others, Clay's one, others, etc., where not only can I, enrich it so I can get information about the individual, like understanding who they are, what their title is, a little bit more details on their LinkedIn profile. I can understand a little bit more about the company. What are the priorities? What do they do? Do they have a 10K out or anything like that? If it's a public, so I can bring all these resources in, and then I can have generative AI basically in a structured format give me call prep notes, and so it would give me things like prospect's name, what's the title of their company, what are a couple of bullet points about the company themselves, what are a couple bullet points about the LinkedIn profile or them as an individual, what are some ideas for conversation starters, and then really give me how to, some insight about maybe how my solution or how my product could impact them. And so I can do all of this in a matter of seconds, really, because it sends it, it automates it, it generates it, and then it pushes it back to a Slack or team message to that person that the meeting got booked with. So again, SDR, AE, et cetera. And so this has been, really successful, not only in saving time for an individual, because sometimes this stuff, if you do it correctly, could take hours. At the other time, if you don't do it correctly, or you don't do it at all because you skip out on it, it could hurt your lead opportunity conversion, or your discovery to stage 2 pipeline conversion. It could interrupt a lot of things for you, because this is your first meeting, or even it could be a second or third meeting. And so what I've seen here is that not only has it decreased the time that it takes for an individual to do the research, they get more quality research done quickly. But then also I've seen conversion rates go up in regards to the next meeting or the next step in the funnel process. So this one is a kind of a simple one, not overly complex, but so much value and impact here for everyone.
I love that. I'll talk through mine, which again, I think I took a similar approach walking through this. It's simple but really really impactful. So the company that I'm at now is e-commerce based, and we do high order volumes. But one of our main problems that we have is that when we ship our product is really driven based on the geography, what's happening with weather patterns in specific states. It's not a consistent general, you place this and it ships 7 days later. You might put an order in October, but we don't actually send it to you until, May or June, just based on the agricultural industry and when things are planting. And so one of the problems that we looked to solve was, how do we actually set the right ship date? And historically, this has been a manual piece that the order fulfillment team is going in and saying like, oh, okay, based on this, this, and this, we need to set this date. And when you're looking at, thousands of orders, that's a high cost for manual effort. It also um, can lead to inconsistencies and inaccuracies as well, depending on who's doing it, when they're doing it, how they're doing it. So one of the solutions we created is as orders come in, we've created a reference table, and I'm going to call it, a citizens developer reference table, right? That's not sitting behind a bunch of code, that can be adjusted really easily by the order fulfillment team based on weather patterns, seasonalities, to set those ship dates in a dynamic way. When we talk about letting everybody be able to be part of the automation, it puts that ownership on the right team. And so based on that reference table, as orders come in, based on the product that they're buying, where they're located, it sets that date over and then passes that data into Salesforce, which then goes to our 3PL. So when we think about, improving something that's highly manual, repetitive, cross-functional, because we're going between, not only the sales process from the order placement, but then through the order management and then into the logistics and delivery side of the business, but also, invisible, something that, is happening on the back end, that when it works great. If you're not doing it, everyone knows and your customers get upset, and highly, highly impactful, right? Because customers want the product at the right time. So, one of those pieces, the other big things, facilitating those handoffs and that coordination between the teams in an automated way, and then ensuring we've got that right data hygiene. All right, Lindsay.
Awesome. I love that workflow. That's such a great example of something that you took and were able to just scale immensely. Very cool. So this one is one that we recently built at Zapier, and we have just a ton of customer data. So we have tons of customers using Zapier in so many different ways. We're a very horizontal product, so we can be used to to automate really, truly anything. And so we have, customers using our product. Then we have, information about customers that reps might find by doing research on the web. And then customers also engage with our support team, and our support team operates out of Zendesk. So, we could fully integrate these platforms, of course, but we wanted to figure out a way to like just make it really easy at a glance for anyone at Zapier to be able to see a perfect 360 view of a customer and what they are using automation for, what automation needs they might have, how they've engaged with our product. And it informs actually not just our sales reps, but I've even gone in and used the customer summarizer to try and learn, about what different companies are doing with automation to inspire our own RevOps team, which has been really cool. So we built this app that basically takes information across these different applications and then uses OpenAI to summarize the key points in something that's really readable and concise for anybody who is looking to learn more about an individual customer. And then they don't have to click around to like multiple different tools or like spend time kind of digging into different elements. And then we can always adjust this app in the OpenAI prompt to like deliver something different for a different team. So we've been able to use this customer summarizer concept in a lot of different like forms across the company. So it saved a lot of folks time, even if you think about folks in product who like want to get a sense for customer interviews. They can hop into right now we have this living in HubSpot, so they can hop in there, but we can also send this information to places like Slack or where teams work as well, which has been really cool. And the capability here is really taking data from a lot of different places and being able to summarize it and put it in a succinct framework for people to understand and be able to like personalize and engage with customers in the right way. So yeah, this was a fun one, I think, and really highly impactful because it gave different folks across our organization a better, deeper understanding of our customers.
I love the like dissemination of the output too, right? So being able
Yeah.
to take this, centralize it, but then get it disseminated to where it needs to go.
Exactly. And then also you don't have to give everybody access to your CRM, right? Like you don't have to like train everybody on how to go in and use it. You can actually just take the key info and put it where you need it to go. And then you don't have any risks with compliance or anything like that, or additional enablement that you have to do.
I think it's
Perfect.
awesome, and
Well,
and I love the fact that it's focused on the right side of the bow tie, as I call it, the customer, which is great. And by the way, I just have to let everyone know, I did steal Lindsay's design, if you couldn't tell. So she actually, I will call it out. She has an amazing design here, and I did steal it. So I know you saw mine first, but I just want to make sure that that was clear. She's the artist, not me. So.
I also realized that I should have stole the design when I saw it, but I went cheater way and took the screenshot.
I cannot take credit for the design. I am not a designer. All good.
Perfect. So, as we wrap up and start going into Q&A, which I'm really excited for the audience questions here, just really important to remember, the four key things, right? The murky framework, like that, pain-based approach to determining what to automate, when to automate, looking at the capabilities, which is our needs-based approach, remembering your ABCs, Ds, and Es of scaling and making sure you're getting that buy-in, and then using your community, right? So Rev Genius community, appreciate them hosting these great events for us. Like great gold mine for how to get that inspiration, right? And best practices and learning from others. I think is so impactful, right? A lot of us are facing similar challenges at the source level, and so understanding how others have addressed them, solved them, is just a huge gold mine for how you can bring that into your own organization. So with that, we're gonna kick over to Q&A. Make sure you're dropping questions into the chat. There's the Q&A section or the chat section. But so while you guys are working through that, I'm gonna kick off with my first question: when shouldn't you automate something, right? So we talked all about, hey, automate, 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 automate. When shouldn't we be automating, right? What are your kind of rules of thumb for let's not do that?
I think for me, I'll start. So I think for me, going actually back to a couple of points. So one is if we don't know the process end to end. Two, I would say if you haven't got the process documentation figured out. Three, I would say if it's a pilot or POC, something like that, that you don't know if it's going to be short lived or long. Again, going back to do the unscalable to then figure out scalable. And then I think four would be I see a lot of people starting to automate too much with AI because they think it's like a silver bullet, or they think that, whether it's the spam cannons that you get or other things. I think you got to really now take a step back and think about what do I really need: creativity, judgment, strategic, all those types of things that we bring to the table, and not just AI your way to everything. And so I think I'm starting to kind of see that as an emerging trend. So I would just say really think about the process end to end, where it makes sense to automate and where it doesn't overall. And I think you can use a lot of those things to help you.
Yeah, I think I would echo all of those. Those are great examples. Another one that comes to mind is when you're trying to learn something, or you're trying to figure out what the right thing to automate is, right? Like you don't want to jump and I think in RevOps we get excited because we're builders and we know we can automate pretty much anything that you give us. But sometimes it's worth it to take a step back, because if you jump too quickly into automation without, to Jonathan's point, like really understanding like what is the ideal process for the customer that we want this to be, then you kind of got to backtrack and you got to undo things. So if you're looking to learn like what resonates with customers, for example, or like is this a sales motion that is repeatable or scalable, like definitely just try it first and get some learnings out the door to figure out, is it going to be high value enough for you to put in the effort to build something more scalable.
Yeah,
What about you,
absolutely. And
Molly? Yeah.
the thing that I'd add in here too, which I think you guys kind of stole mine. I should have asked myself the question first. But when you think about the customer experience, right, and like just those interactions, I think a lot of times we align really heavily on, how do we automate those touch points, but thinking about, where empathy or understanding, or where there might be nuanced, communications or components that come out of the situation where, automation might not be the right approach, and you hurt that experience. So, one of the things that I always suggest is, like, as you're building building these processes out, back to Jonathan's point of really understanding the process, is putting that customer first mindset in there of going through with your customer in mind and saying, like, does this meet that expectation? And also getting customer feedback on that too, especially anything you're doing that is directly impacting your customers. We've got a couple of great questions in chat. So one of which is, how are you reporting back to the CRO, CFO, the value of the tools and automations you're putting into place?
I love this question. I think this is like the skill that goes under the radar for revenue leaders to really hone. And so the way that I've done this is I've found that what you don't want to do is get to a situation where your CFO starts digging into your stack and is like, hey, like, why are we using this? What is it doing? It's really about providing this like steady feed of information over the course of like your entire year, right? So what I do is at the end of the week, I actually do like an executive level roll up, not on like the details of the automation that we built, but like the value that it unlocked. So we put a new automation in place that closed this gap in the funnel, and we're seeing a certain amount of revenue, or we're seeing reps save about 2 to 4 hours per week. So I actually do like a steady drip of like information, and I'm sure to call out like what tools we used and like why it's impactful for the business. But I found that that's the best way to like get to a point where you're not in a situation where folks are sort of questioning like why we have these tools or automations or why we're putting in the work to begin with. You really do have to like manage up and sell the value of what you're building. I'm curious if others have thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah. So great question, by the way. So I would echo what Lindsay said. I think for me, just a couple things that I may add on to that would be we have our entire kind of funnel map from end to end with our conversion rates, our time, by stage, our volume that's coming into each of the stages, all the way from marketing through through customer success and support. And so depending upon, to Lindsay's point, depending upon the automation that we have or the tool, I can find specific, direct or indirectly influence KPIs across there that I can share, right? So one may be, as Lindsay mentioned, time. One may be an increase of conversion from this stage to that stage, or one may be a decrease in volume of tickets and our support costs. Each time someone comes into support, it's a X dollars per contact, right? So there's definitely different ways. I would say don't try to boil the ocean, but maybe pick where you think it's mostly impactful, or maybe one or two areas, and be able to showcase that. And so one is if you have to put a business case together, which a lot of times sometimes you do if you don't have just a budget to go spend. You put a business case together around what automation that you're doing, and really what you think that, like 2 or 3 things it's going to impact and where. And then if you've got that mapped out and you're reviewing it on any sort of ongoing cadence, like we review ours at least weekly across the entire, called a bow tie for those of you that are familiar with revenue architecture, but we look at it on a weekly basis, and ultimately I can start seeing things move over time. Where was it at when I started before the automation? What was the maybe trailing, how many ever months, et cetera, and where is it now? And as I see these incremental things pop up, I'm able to again share those on some sort of cadence, whether that's when it happens or kind of early view. Hey, we only had this for the last 3 weeks. Here's what we're seeing. Then going into a monthly, quarterly view, what have we really seen? And I think just being got to think about it. Finance folks are very data oriented, and so if you come at them qualitatively with not data, not quantitatively, then they just look at you and like, okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. So you got to find those. You got to find those ways to showcase that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great call out. One of the things that I'm curious to get perspective on, and I know Lindsay, you might have a little bit of unfair advantage here, but thinking about making an investment in an automation platform or tool, right? And how you build that right business case, but also how do you pick the right type of vendor for being able to support various automation components? So Jonathan, I'm going to put you in the hot seat on that one.
Picking the right vendor. Man, I've made so many mistakes on this one too. So I think learning from the mistakes. I think going to. It's almost kind of repetitive to what we said, Molly, but I think it's really important to orient. So I've made some dumb decisions in my career. I can self-reflect and call myself that. On kind of what you said was the shiny new object, or what a vendor was telling me that they would deliver, and I really didn't do my due diligence on a couple things. One was, is our company at a stage, and do we have the foundational things that we need in place in order for me to add on to the stack or bring this vendor in? I never really asked that question until early on in my career, because I thought like, oh yeah, the sales folks are going to eat this up, or the marketing ones are going to eat this up, et cetera, because this is going to really drive ROI for them. And so I think early on, it's like, are we even ready for a new tool, or replacing a tool with the vendor? I think the second thing is, I would reach out to, a lot of times the vendors will say, hey, let me give you some customers that you can talk to, but you know what they're going to say. Those are all the good ones. I want to talk to customers that just churned with you in the last 3 to 4 months. And I want to understand why they churned and really get some insight into that. Did the tool not deliver? And if it didn't deliver, was it because of their own internal flaws? Which if all of them were because of their own internal flaws, meaning that they didn't get the right adoption, they didn't get change management, budgets got cut, or they didn't do their due diligence, then I can, then that really helps them. But I really want to understand why people are leaving a product as well. And then I think thirdly, and what I've seen, and I messed up early in my career, is how does it flow and integrate with the rest of my stack? Because I've been, the last 3 or 4 companies that I've been with, as soon as I came in, it was just such a fragmented and siloed tech stack, didn't talk to each other, or if it did talk to each other, it's very basic and you didn't have everything flowing. And so how easy is it, and how robust is it? So how easy is it to integrate and connect, but how robust are those connections to ensure that I can look across all teams and everything and make sure? So I would say, if anything, do your diligence. Not only are you ready internally, but also what is it that this product, software, vendor, whatever, would be able to do for you, and can you implement it and get adoption effectively, even if it can deliver the ROI as it can.
Yeah, the thing that I love that you said is like interviewing a former customer, right? So we always look at like the case study of like the existing customer and getting that reference, but like talking to somebody who left, I think is so impactful. So that was like a huge takeaway that I was like, that's a great idea. The other thing that I always think about too, and you brought this up, right, is like we talk about scale, we talk about growth. Like, can your vendor grow with you? Can they scale with you? The cost of any sort of migration is huge, because you're effectively rebuilding to build on top of. So how do you make sure that you're looking for that right partnership that's not, just that first year subscription and can grow? Lindsay, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think those are spot on. The thing that I think I've learned over the past several years too is like, is the vendor like shipping? Is their product team getting improvements out the door, or has it been like sort of the same for like the last, set amount of time? I think your point about can they grow with you is like so important. So like, are they agile enough and flexible enough to meet your needs today and meet your needs tomorrow? And a good indication of that is like, are they shipping product updates? Are they improving and listening to customer feedback? Because it's just so competitive. There are so many like SaaS and automation tools on the market, and Zapier pitch, like Zapier just can allow you to do so many different things that it becomes like a really good option, I think, for people who just want to get started and then want to be able to scale and grow and evolve their stack over time.
I think that's super important, and I will plus one that, because so many times everyone's willing to show you their roadmap on paper, more than likely. But the question is, do they deliver that, and can they? And so to that point, what it reminded me of is when I do talk to existing customers, that's where what you just said, Lindsay, is so important. I want to reemphasize that, as well as you, Molly, on can they grow with you, and are they shipping products, and are they listening to customers? So where I spend my time with an existing customer would be, tell me the last 10, 10 or 5 or what things that they delivered on their product that, one, either you suggested, and or 2, that was really impactful, and are they constantly, how often and frequently are they delivering new things? That's where I spend my time with them, because it's more of a fact-based thing. It's not like how I feel, and yes, I love the company, so I'm going to give you all the highlights. It's more so, yes, they deliver products on a monthly basis. Yes, here I've noted exactly 2 things I've requested that have been delivered, so they are listening to customers, etc. I think it's very, very important when you're thinking about this.
Absolutely. And we've got another great question on, building automation in-house versus leveraging out of the box solutions. Like, what have you found from like a pros and a cons, and how do you make decisions around that? Lindsay, I'll let you kick off.
Yeah, so I think, it's interesting. There's like a few different ways you can go, right? Like you can use tools like Zapier to create automations and build workflows that are going to, increase efficiency, et cetera. You can look at tools that are maybe like more specialized that do the thing that you need it to do. You could build it yourself. So your RevOps team, and that's why, RevOps are great at building, especially with no code solutions. Or you could, look for engineering support or outsource building workflows. So I think it really depends on what you need, and to the point that we made earlier around selecting the right tool is like, are you going to select something that you can grow with? And what I like about having RevOps teams sort of being able to like build automation with no code solutions is that like you sort of have the control in your hands, and you can, be flexible and agile. I think businesses change a lot, like especially if you're, a startup or a scale up, and you're trying to find the right go to market motion. Like you need something that's going to be flexible. And so purchasing or procuring a new tool, that takes time and commitment, or like going out and finding engineering resources to build something for you, also a big investment. And when you need flexibility and agility and the ability to sort of like tailor your stack and your CRM to meet your needs, that's where I think like automation solutions that ops teams can build automations themselves can become just such a powerful and great option.
Yeah, and I think a lot about, how much like of your current process, right? So, does it meet the needs that you have versus, going
Yeah.
and building, something in-house that's like highly custom. If there's something that already exists that can support your existing process and existing business, I think we all know it's really hard to get dev resources and get that investment, especially in a lot of organizations today. So it's, is there something on the market that meets those business needs? Jonathan, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very interesting question, and I would say, to that point, if it's something that I can do in a no code solution out of the box, if you will, I tend to lean on that first, because number one, it's the quickest way, going back to the conversation about bandwidth, and it's the least maintenance, right? So I don't have to really internally maintenance it as much. And so I think first, if I can do it that way, and I can do it to the degree that we need the automation to work, then I think that's my choice one. And so I try to think about, can I get 60, 70, 80% of my automations done in that realm, because I can do more automations with less people, and less time, really. And so the second thing is the custom automation. So where I focus here is it something unique to my business? And do I have like custom objects, or is there some sort of custom flow that's unique to my business that I can't really, I'd have to really try to build something very complex. Or maybe off the shelf, out of the box automation tool would not work for that. And that's where I really want to spend my time. And I try to spend non-dev resource time if possible, because getting their time is even harder than getting my own, my own CRM devs team time or any other tool time. So really try to think about, can I build it in such a way that I have a little bit more control of if I need something quickly, or if I need to maintenance it, et cetera, that I can do it. And then I think the third option is then go, it's all out of our wheelhouse. So can I get some engineering? That's kind of how I try to think about it.
I love that. Another good question around, scaling automation, high risk in terms of giving more people access to sensitive tools, data, things that, you've really got to understand to not break, right? How have you mitigated that in your own companies? How do you control the right access, manage change, and help to, just reduce risk?
Yeah, I think for me, I think this is always a touchy one. So I think, one is having the right controls, ensuring that you've got the right profiles built, et cetera, that you have. I think secondly is, honestly, I don't think people intentionally want to do something that's negative or out of policy with data or sensitive access. So I think really where we don't do a good job, a lot of us don't, is really training and giving the education around what you should and should not do. Because I don't think people just wake up and say, yeah, I got access to this, so I'm going to go do these malicious things with it. I just think that they make mistakes because they don't know. They don't know what is right, what is wrong sometimes, or maybe it's gray, and so they don't know. So I think education around it before you give them access. So in order to get access, I need you to go through these things to ensure that you know what you're getting, what access you do have, what we can do with it and what we cannot. And I think that goes the same way of breaking things. So before you release, going back to the ABCs and the E, empowering people, ensuring that they know, what it is they can do and cannot do, so it doesn't break certain things that you have. I have a recent story. Good thing that we've set things up in a sandbox in production. I have a recent story though, where we just got someone brand new on our growth marketing team, and they're really, they really like going in and messing with things and trying to automate stuff and do all these things. And they came in, they had all these great ideas, but what they didn't realize was, again, going back to one of the things I mentioned earlier, is looking at the holistic automation and where it affects other teams. They built something in the sandbox that completely broke the way we do account assignments and opportunity flows and all these other things. And they were like, yeah, we should just implement this. And it was like, I was so glad that they had their own little box to play in, because if they would have had the ability to implement, it would have been a holy nightmare in the company. So I think giving people also, if you have the ability to have a sandbox or something that they can play in and test things out once they have it, and it doesn't go into production, I think that's a smart approach too, because then you give them then you give them the ability to kind of measure, kind of build the things that they want to, figure out what happens with it.
Absolutely. Lindsay, thoughts from your end?
Yeah, totally. I'm like, I don't know. I have a philosophy in revenue operations that sometimes we hold on to too much. We hold the reins a little too tightly. Although, Jonathan, you're giving me heart palpitations with your story. But I do think you have to create the guardrails, right? So admin controls and proper user provisioning, and then also training, like you said, Jonathan. But what you don't want to do is hold the reins too tight and then you become a bottleneck. So you really have to find ways to enable folks to be able to self-serve. And we do try and do that as much as possible on our team, but there is a risk. So you kind of have to weigh what's super risky, what's not as risky, and make those decisions on sort of a one-off basis. Yeah, I'm curious, Molly, any advice from your side?
Yeah, the two things that I think a lot about is I think when we build things, we assume it's always going to work, right? But back to kind of that beginning piece of doing that pre-mortem of when will it fail, and making sure you're setting the right alerts and notifications up so that you can monitor if something isn't working. right? So setting up, whether it's just a clean dashboard of like, okay, this is working. There aren't data gaps. Like things are doing what they need to be doing. And I can, validate that and get that peace of mind that, something didn't break and there are silent, it's a silent break. I think that's one really big piece. And that's something that's, caused me pain in my career of like just thinking it's going to work and assuming everything's going to go the way that it needs to go. And then you realize something accidentally was turned off because you forgot to hit activate when you made a change and it sat off for a while and you didn't catch it, right? So making sure you have those right safety nets, those right alerts, as well as the right way to monitor either the success or the failure of it, because sometimes you need to pick which one you can see pending the process, but making sure you're just keeping that pulse. I think we've got maybe time for one last question or final thought here is just, how you balance the ABCs, D's and E's when you're in a fast-paced environment too. So making sure you're checking those boxes while moving quickly. Any final thoughts there?
Oh my gosh. I think you really do have to. I think the most important element of the ABC DE framework is the company goals. Like stay focused on the company goals as a number one. I think being able to be agile and try things and move quickly is also really important for revenue operations teams. We don't want to like be bottlenecks or blockers or you know, cease experimentation and big ideas. Of course, we want to support, but as long as those things align with the company goals, you can make some concessions on some of the other things. And so I think that's the number one piece of advice I'd have.
Jonathan, any parting words of wisdom?
No, I think again, use these amazing frameworks because ultimately, I wish I had them on the mistakes that I've made in my past. So I think using those frameworks and making sure that everything that you do is aligned with goals, can drive impact. You have stakeholder involvement and collaboration, and you really have the right documentation and understanding of what you're doing and how it will impact, and then ensure that you have the change management and implementation plan to get adoption. So all of that work that you did leading up to that doesn't just fall flat when no one adopts it or it doesn't see the impact. So
Absolutely. Well, perfect. Thank you both for being here today, and thank you to the audience. And we'll send the recording out. And have a great August 1st. Can't believe we're already here.
I know, right? Crazy.
Thank
you all.
you.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Molly.
Bye.
Thanks, Molly.
Bye.